Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a fascinating discussion on a very interesting topic on harnessing accessible and affordable microgrids to drive decentralized electricity and energy production in India. It's a very apt topic for discussion, especially as we're going through this energy transition process in globally and in India. And as I was researching on some interesting stories, I came about the story in 2012 where Hurricane Sandy ravaged the whole of New York area. Lights were out in New York, which is not very common. And there's only one campus that stood out, and that was the New York University, which was the only place or location which had its own microgrid. It not only provided emergency services, but stood out of the promise of microgrids and what it can do to electrical systems and globally as we look at it. But that was a story, those folklores were story of access, of being, one or two examples here and there. Things are changing. And it's just not about access anymore, microgrids. There is a push to make it more resilient, to make this as a frontier or a tool to get into more decentralized, participatory energy systems. Two or three other changes that we're seeing in India, which is actually makes it very interesting. When you thought about microgrids, it was about rural access, it was about this far-flung military zones which we had to put out. But things are changing. It is not rural anymore. It's urban with the rooftop solar penetration that we're starting to see. Does it hold a promise of taking this more mainstream? With the component costs coming down, can it make it more affordable? Consumers, from being pure consumers of electricity and power to becoming more prosumers, where they want to know, be a part of the generation, storage, and maybe in some cases, trading of electricity, peer-to-peer sharing. Interesting models, and some estimates believe that 30% of all electricity in the future will come from DERs. And India will have to be at the forefront of the transition, given we are the center point of energy transition globally, at least one of them. And there has been a start, whether you look at the PM Kusum program for rural, the rooftop solar, massive penetration that we've seen in the last few years, or the component costs of batteries coming down and storage becoming more accessible. The question, therefore, is it enough for this to become mainstream? How do we scale? And how do we make it move the story of microgrids from more access to more reliable and affordable power? And to discuss all these topics, I couldn't have asked for a more qualified panel than what I have today in our midst, who are experts and have decades of experience in both policy, execution at scale, and driving innovation, both in policy making as well as execution on the ground. And let me start with the introduction. Mr. Deepak Nayak. He's Vice President and Head of the Renewables at L&T India. 3 decades of experience in the renewable space. As you know, L&T is one of the largest renewable EPC players in India, and Deepak heads that business and will share his perspective on what it takes to create these successful stories at scale and making it affordable for multiple projects that are going on right now. To his left, we have Shri Bhupinder Singh Bhalla ji, former Secretary, MNRE, till 2024. And former technical member of the Appellate Tribunal of Electricity. Mr. Singh has been at the forefront of major policies that have touched upon the energy transition story in India, whether it's the National Green Hydrogen Mission or developing the PM Surya Ghar. So thank you, Bhupinder ji, for being part of the panel. And I have to his left Shailesh Kumar Mishra ji, who was former CEO, Power Grid Corporation, the transmission business in Himachal Pradesh. Again, a very apt person to talk about microgrids. He's seen this up close. And Director of Power Systems, former Director of Power System at SECI. So welcome to this wonderful discussion. And Just to kick things off, maybe I'll start with the Deepak. And we've heard about microgrids before. It's not the first time we're hearing it or discussing the potential of microgrids. Question is, why is it apt to discuss? Why now? What is the role of microgrids going forward? I'll go around the table, around the group for this, but let me start with you, Deepak.
Good morning, all. Thanks, Samvit, for the question. So, basically, the microgrids are to be looked at like a intelligent extension of the central grid. So, it's not in conflict with central grid, but an intelligent extension of that. And what we talk here is, beyond central grid, where historically we have been supplying power to the consumers, which is a unidirectional flow of power. We are getting into a bidirectional mode. More than supply of energy, it is supplying reliable, efficient, and clean energy. So that's why this particular aspect or this particular microgrid is becoming transformative nowadays. Now, why we are talking of this now, today, specifically in Indian context? So basically, if I have to group it, what is the reason why we should take a microgrid presently? I will say there are three levers which are impacting why we should start right now. So the first lever is demand. The demand of energy, if you see, this has been historically increasing. If I take FY21 to today we have crossed about 250 gigawatts of demand, which is roughly a 33% growth year on year from FY21, which is likely to grow up to 450 gigawatts in another 5 years' time. So are we keeping this pace with the demand, the electricity part, whether it is keeping pace with the demand? So the answer is no, specifically because we don't have a transmission capacity. The transmission is not enough today. So if I have to move from today's 5 lakh circuit kilometer to a 6.5 lakh circuit kilometer in 5 years' time, that's the ask to have this kind of demand to be fulfilled. So roughly a 30,000 circuit kilometer per annum we should be putting in India, but that's not the case. Last year was hardly 6,500 to 7,000 kilometers of lines have been laid. So that means we are not able to put improve the infrastructure in a rapid pace with the growing demand. Second, again, the second lever, if I talk, is the capacity addition is increasing every day. The renewable energy, we have crossed solar 135 gigawatt, we have crossed now wind, all renewable put together 250 gigawatts we have crossed. And we are going to have a 450 gigawatt by 2031. So that makes it further, increasingly difficult for the grid to be managed. The third lever is the cost. Did we see the cost, what was there in 5 years, and today what is the cost running? So if you see, the solar and battery prices have come down drastically, which makes it meaningful for us to create more and more microgrids. At L&T, we started doing a microgrid in Bihar. We have done a few years before, where there are decentralized power distribution across the remote villages. So I think that kind of situation is coming. So with these three levers, demand growth, renewable energy push, and the cost of power reducing, I think that's why this is the right time to start get into microgrids a bit aggressively. Thank you.
And Deepak will come back to the affordability cost part, very important element. Bhupinder ji, your...
Yeah, thank you, Sambit. Just to add to what Mr. Nayak said, the clean energy, of course, electricity demand is growing. Everyone knows, has been pointed out. Clean energy is growing at a very fast rate. And I think the grid stability is becoming a big issue. So whenever you talk to DISCOMs, I think the most worried about the stability part when they want to decide whether they should add more clean energy or they should add thermal for their load requirement. So grid balancing has become a crucial aspect for the DISCOM. It's bread and butter for them. So it's not possible. The blackouts is no longer acceptable. Even fluctuations are frowned upon, and therefore everybody wants stable power. And that is the reason that I think it's just a time to see, to address this issue, how best to have stable power. And if we can have stable power, pockets of stable power available, microgrids could be one of the solutions. Basically, these grids allow, load balancing. They are platform for, demand response, immediate response, demand response, and therefore one needs to look at it from that aspect. In addition, of course, from the strategic point of view, uh, even not going from the economic side, but if from the strategic point of view, you might want to have microgrids, as you mentioned about New York example. We could have pockets where we want power available. We'll still be connected with the grid, but we do not want any fluctuation. Also forget about blackout. So for strategic reasons, you may want to have microgrid. I think I'll just add these reasons to what was conveyed earlier, and I think we can. I think that is the reason we need to look at it. We need to put our thinking caps and see, now that we have traveled such a big distance and 260 gigawatts almost of renewables, and we have to go to 500. Is it the right time to enter, or focus on microgrids again?
Shailesh, you've managed a business in a hilly state of India where access is a challenge. What is your view on the role of microgrids going forward?
Good afternoon. I have a very strong view on this. The renewables should always be a distributed generation, because point is that it is available across the country, solar, and shifting from one place to another, solar addition is like adding the cost. So if there is a issue of the space is available, so we should do renewable distributed. But here the topic is microgrid. Government of India has done an approach to the almost all villages through the Saubhagya scheme, and they have reached every mile, every end mile of the country. But despite of that, if you see the success of 3-4 operators, those who are doing the microgrids, and they are selling the power at the market rate without any subsidy, 20 rupees per unit, and people are purchasing. So that is the things we have to understand, because point is that we have the all the end mile things, but power reliability is not there. So that's why these are successful. So they have, and the one of the player, two of the player already they have reached the break even. They are in profit zone. They are not in loser zone. So from the lending perspective, this has become a viable alternatives what is available. So now the time has come, because government has already done enough in the renewable, and this around 135 gigawatt solar has come, so which has created value chains and the reduction of the cost. So this will give the, if focus of this microgrid will be done, and government approach will be that this further cost will be reduced, and if you allow this microgrid some different perspectives for the connections in the grid point of view, so that will further reduce the cost. So this way we have to see the both the transformative this is, and why it is needed, because value chain is created and this cost is reduced. So that is my perspective.
So it looks like there's a coming together of the demand side requirement, the challenges with the traditional centralized system poses with in terms of expectation of the demand, and then the cost curves, kind of falling in place, all coming together. Let me go back to you, Bhupinder. I think from policy standpoint, if you think of the regulatory framework needed to bring this to mainstream, uh, how do you accelerate this? How do we need to think a little innovatively on the policy side and regulation side?
Currently, uh, under Section 14 of the Electricity Act actually exempts uh, requirement of a license if you want to generate and distribute electricity in the rural area. There's some requirements for safety and other aspects, but there's no license required. And that is one reason that also led to the pitfalls that Mr. Mishra mentioned about microgrids. The tariffs are very varied. It could be 2 times to 8 times the grid electricity tariff. There's no regulation, so therefore everything is left to the developer. The consumers that cluster may not have the wherewithal to kind of argue or contest or even challenge anything with the developer. So therefore, we are in an unregulated state as far as the microgrids is concerned. The question is, how do we improve it? And therefore, I think first thing I think what is needed is that government, national government, the government of India as well as state government need to have a policy thinking about, focusing about microgrids. I mean, I know the issue is if we can have all, frankly, if we have all villages linked with electricity, stable electricity, fully 24/7 available, then why would we need any other microstructure at all? But the fact is that it's not. There are voltage fluctuations, availability is there, but there could be some outages, rare instances which are there, which do happen in the hinterland. And therefore, first is government of India and state government should say, yes, we will support. That there is a need, now that we have connected every village and every corner of the country, but there is a need at some pockets to where microgrids could be deployed. Second is, I think we need to say make some amendments. We need to have regulatory oversight on tariffs, on not only on tariffs, but on looking at all the stakeholders and seeing how the regulator, how the developer should establish as well as operate the microgrids. It's very important. I mean, in fact, there could be disputes. We could have in our regulation, then we could add about how will the dispute be settled. And what about the new concepts like peer-to-peer trading? That's something which is not yet. I mean, we've envisioned that in our PM Suryagar, as you might have seen. But for microgrids, we still have to kind of formally induct it into our regulatory framework, and that's something which is very important. In addition, I think maybe lastly I would say, apart from the regulatory oversight, you need to have regulatory guidance, some kind of guidance. I mean, Central Electricity Authority is our kind of where everybody, they lay out the technical guidelines and so on. I think they should take the lead in giving very detailed guidance on how the microgrids can be laid out, on the technical standards for interconnection, interoperability, on smart metering, advanced electronic systems. Some guidance and saying if a microgrid comes up, this is what you have to do. I think so. Therefore, larger regulatory oversight. There's no larger. I mean, there's nothing at the moment. And then more regulatory guidance is something with the way forward.
I think just the regulatory framework, given what Mr. Nayak was saying, it's going to be bidirectional. It's not going to be siloed, kind of power generation systems. But if it's bidirectional, there has to be a framework around which this is governed. Mr. Mishra, you have seen the utilities point of view. How do utilities see microgrids? Nuisance, can partner, competition? How do they see them, and how do you see this, kind of interactions evolving over time?
Grid, if you see in perspective of grid is so vast and is huge. So microgrid can never be any challenge to them, any risk to them, any competitor to them. They will always be a supporter for the grid. Because point is that this grid, as the penetration of the renewables gets increased in the grid, there are a lot of issues of the for maintenance of the grid, for the regulation of the grid. So that requires a lot of addition of the equipments in the central grid, that is a STATCOM, this synchronous condenser, and all these things to manage the grid. But if you distribute this and the microgrid type of things comes in the rural area and small power plants in district level, so this will increase the resilience of the grid. Grid will be more powerful to act, and there will not be needed much of the investment in these elements, what we are doing right now. So this will definitely be helpful to them. And second part is that if you see the Indian Energy Exchange profile, so every day there are two slots where it reaches to 10 rupees per unit. That is in morning slot 7 to 9 and evening slot 6:40 to 8:40. In that period, if you use these microgrids for because they have the storage element, we allow them somewhere they can feed to the grid, and that type of things will start. So this will grow very fast, and it will support to the grid. It will support to the national mainstream, and availability of the power to the last mile people, those who need maximum. Because point is that we should see, we as a consumer in the urban areas are paying about 6 rupees, 7 rupees, those who are having the money, and those who are not having the money paying 20 rupees. So that part needs to be seen, that because what the microgrid has to be supported, and we have to do in the grid perspective, because they are supporting the grid, we can give the more and benefit encouragement to them, so it will help to the grid.
And Deepak, I think question you mentioned about the affordability. These are good experiments, but always seen as very expensive. The only reason they could be justified in the past was it provided access where there was none. To become mainstream, this is going to be a key lever, right? Of how do you make them affordable, at scale, and viable for small businesses and consumers.
So, Sambit, I feel, as I told already, it's going to be extension of the central grid. Today, it's not affordable because of various factors. Probably the scale is too small. Anything which starts at a very high cost. You can take the case of batteries, you can take the case of solar modules. How the cost has come down. Now we are talking of hydrogen, the cost is very high for green hydrogen, it's coming down. So if you see now, let's go back to the capex of a renewable energy source. The solar ones, the tariff is starting at 2.5 to 2.6 rupees currently. Even the battery prices have come down drastically below 3 rupees level. So even a combined solar plus battery may cost around 3 rupees, looking at the current tenders which has been opened. So that means the capex has come down drastically. Now, if you take the factor of the scale, so it's a low scale, not like our central grid, it's a low scale item. So you may not achieve economies of scale immediately. Thereby, you may not achieve 3 rupees of tariff, but you can definitely achieve something which is comparable to what a urban consumer is drawing or paying for the power today. But definitely, as everyone in the panel said, the current cost is very high. People are charging 20 rupees, 18 rupees, and all. So I think there has to be a regulatory framework where these tariffs are controlled. Second, we also need to have an aggregation method. It cannot be a single entity doing a microgrid and expecting the cost to reduce. Probably we need to facilitate having some agencies where they take care of the microgrid aspect. They build the microgrids, multiple microgrids across India, do a interoperability across them, and then once the aggregation takes place, probably this cost can come down. And when somebody sees a volume, today why the financiers are ready to finance a solar project, a mega solar project at a very low interest rate, is because you see continuous cash flows coming over a period of time, and you try to give at a much cheaper rate. So the cost of finance probably also has to come down for a microgrid application. For that, it has to be appealing. Like there is an operator having multiple range of microgrids, and once it is extended all over India, wherever there is a AT&C loss is more, I think those places we can make these microgrids more effective, more viable. We'll still continue to pay a little bit more than what we are paying for this power what we are drawing from the grid. But I feel in the interest of reliability, flexibility, and interest of getting a clean energy, I think this is worth investing for the initial phase. And then it will fall in line, the cost will fall in line.
Just a follow-up question. I think if you think of private developers, Deepak, what will it take for them to get into these, make this a mainstream business model, or actively kind of create such opportunities, right?
So as I told, it has to be an operator based who sees the distributed energy resource as a overall asset which is being owned by a specific entity. So for that, I think government intervention is a must. If you've seen how this PM Suryagar can be compared with a small microgrid, which is generating power. And what is appealing for the consumer today, the cost is definitely high, the initial cost is high, but then you have a subsidy. And then if you equate to your electricity bill, you say, okay, 5 years down the line, you are free from paying an electricity bill. So it's basically free in 5 years' time. So that is appealing for the consumer because government brought in a lot of initiative, a lot of policies where people feel comfortable and they feel it's economically viable, although the initial investment is little more. So I think that's something need to be facilitated by the policies. The private players should feel little comfortable and start investing, be a operator, have multiple microgrids where they can bring in economies of scale. And once they operate microgrids in a multiple location, probably that will bring down the overall cost.
Mr. Mishra, this is a bit of a hypothetical question to you, but assuming that microgrids start contributing to 20 to 30% of the total electricity in future, assuming that like Mr. Nayak said, the economics work out, there is a challenge for the potential challenge for the utility, right? As customers see that they can get more affordable power, they can have greater control over that, they stop taking power from the grid, right? And for people who are still on the grid, it becomes more expensive for them, right? Do you see that kind of a challenge in the future? And if so, what are the strategies utilities could think of using, both to promote this, but also at the same time not create a competitive scenario like that?
You see that in India, the demand is total we are consuming in the year is approximately 800 billion units. On that 225 billion units only the renewable is producing. It is a very small component right now. This component is 20% is there. And there is a growth in the being a developing economy. Every year we are growing at 7%, 8%, 6% energy requirement. So if this growth of the energy is met through this type of arrangement, there will not be any threat. Because the point is that we need such type of instruments which can bring into the system and supply to the electricity to the consumer. So I don't find there is much of the issue on this. Death spiral, what is Western countries' perspective, it is okay, because point is that they have a lot of space in their houses, big chats, so they are able to do big plants. In India, you see that the demand in India, approximately 18% is agriculture, 24% is your household, and 42%, 41% is industrial, 8% is commercial. The major things, consumer, domestic consumer, industry, they do not have such a space to install, replace their energy. Because if you see the major urban areas, there is flats are there is no space there. So that threat will never come. That it is difficult for India. Rather, considering this threat, industry will, this utility needs to improve, because they are not improving right now. Why this grid, these people are successful, microgrid, despite of 20 rupees? Because they say our rectification time is 90 minutes. They claim like that. Within 90 minutes, we rectify the defects and restore the electricity. No discoms say this thing. The point is that we have to see that part, how the discom can be improved. And discom, right now what is happening, everyone is becoming prosumer. Why? Because discom is not supplying them proper energy. Industries, they are setting up their own plants, open access, and this. Why industry needs to set up in this business? Because they are in different business. They need to provide proper electricity at proper rate. So that is your job. That's why discom has been created. So you are not doing your job. That's why others are doing these jobs and getting the cheap electricity. So what discom needs to do? Instead of eyeing for the all the electricity from Rajasthan and Gujarat, They have to study the microgrid in the village and panchayat level, they put the plants. And district level demand growth, what is coming in the next 10 years, they have to set up the district level plants. Both solar and this battery they set up and offer to the industry at the same rate with some addition of their margin. So no consumer will move out from there. Everybody wants to remain with the grid because grid is the such thing. This supplies 24/7. Renewables have different problems because solar and if battery goes, why microgrid successful? Because they are using biomass also. But biomass, this battery, and that's why they are able to give 24/7. But if you go for the battery and solar only, 24/7 is just difficult. So everybody wants to remain with that grid. If such type of arrangement all the discoms will provide, I don't find that any consumer will move. They are happy with them. Only they have to improve their performance.
Moving on to the last section, and maybe I start with you, Mr. Bhalla. If there's one action that you could take, right, to make microgrids more accessible, affordable, and bring it to mainstream, and we talk mainstream about, let's say, in 5 years from now, it is 20-30% of the total electricity system, what would that be?
I think the reason why microgrids are charging higher for like tariff is the cost. I mean, obviously, it is more expensive to create a cluster. For a cluster, a small network, which even though the costs are coming down, as was mentioned by Mr. Nayak, the fact is still higher than the normal grid electricity infrastructure cost that we bear. Therefore, I think it's very important that, and also this cost gets distributed over largely domestic consumers as of now. We have very rare example of some commercial activities being covered. I think the most important thing is bringing more productive applications into the fold of the consumers for a microgrid. So I think they need to be designed in a way that they not only cover the residential requirements, but also small, applications like workshops, rice mills, whatever can be there in the rural area. We need to identify that and then build a cluster to include that, and maybe a small industry. You having a small lathe, just look at the requirement and then see, because we should not be burdening, since we are burdening it with, burdening the residential consumers with a high tariff, and therefore the issues are arising. I think that would be something that I would want to do.
Having a clear definition of cluster, getting combination of consumers, residential, plus a few industries, I think that creates the scale, minimum viable scale for this to be affordable.
It would make it more affordable.
So like same question, what will be your one action to make it real?
I think the statements from Mr. Bhalla and Mr. Misra, I'll go with the same flow. So basically, for microgrid to sustain, the cost has to come down. And for the cost to come down, there has to be nodal agencies having multiple assets where the cost can reduce. And to make it happen, probably the discoms are the best people who can do it. Think not just the cost of electricity, but also a power which is reliable, which can be supplied across the industry. So like if you have our own power plant, like today what C&I consumer does, definitely it's going to be costlier, whereas somebody like a discom doing a multiple plants like this and supplying to various consumers, I think that can be much cheaper. The power can be more reliable, efficient, clean. So I think that is something I would like that the discoms should change the way they are looking at microgrids today, so that this can be penetrated quite fast.
Mr. Mishra, any thoughts from your side on this topic?
If you see the one point, what you're saying, our basically what our traditional way of doing the power generated in one place and bringing it through transmission to the remote place, that concept needs to be changed for the renewables. That mindset needs to be changed. And second most important point, what because these organizations have proved ki they have supplied the power with such type of arrangement despite of no support from the government. So we need to support them, and what they are simply asking, they are asking instead of putting the separate their wire setup, they want to use existing wire setup before the transformer. That thing needs to be provided instead of those who are responsible need not to become the guardian of the system, they become the facilitator of the system. Once that mindset will change, then only this can be done.
No, excellent. I think just two big takeaways for me in this conversation. One, it is not a choice, and in India is uniquely placed versus other markets. We have a massive demand. There is a requirement. We need to. It's not a choice between either utility scale power and microgrids. There is a need for microgrids to occupy a very critical space. Second, it comes down to affordability, and we discussed parts of the affordability equation that needs to be put forth. How do you define the minimum viable scale? It has to be a combination, because you cannot take a system to mainstream by making it 2x more expensive than what's available in the grid. It just creates dissonance in the system. And third, for the first time, I think every other place we hear that you need to deregulate here, Mr. Bhalla, you need to put some guardrails around what is fair play here, right? And then how do you make sure that it goes mainstream? I heard a lot of optimism about this, but I also heard there's a lot of work, and for everyone to come forward with a much clearer framework of how this can become useful. There are clearly use cases that are emerging where this can be beneficial, whether it's on the consumer side or on the CNI side or commercial side. It is not just access; it can be a source of good quality and affordable power, working in tandem with the utility and centralized power systems. With that, I would like to call upon to thank all of you, to thank the panel here. Wonderful having all of you speak about it so passionately, and thank you everyone for your patience in hearing this out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.